It was one of those evenings when the world feels too still. The air was heavy, the lake mirrored the pinkish hue of the setting sun, and all I wanted was a quiet walk to clear my mind. My son, Ethan, had been distant lately. His marriage to Clara seemed to be slipping through cracks I didn't understand. As I rounded the bend near Maple Lake, I froze. Clara stood by the water's edge, her hair wild, her hands trembling. She was dragging something heavy, an old brown suitcase. Before I could call out, she hurled it into the water. The suitcase sank with a loud splash, swallowed by the deep, murky lake. She looked around, eyes darting like a startled bird. When her gaze brushed past my hiding spot, my breath hitched. Then, without a word, she ran. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the ripples spreading across the lake. What had she just thrown away? I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying that moment. The splash, the panic in her eyes. At breakfast, Clara acted as though nothing had happened. She smiled, asked me about my garden, even offered to make pancakes, but I couldn't eat. Ethan joined us, clearly exhausted. I noticed the faint bruise on his wrist, half hidden beneath his sleeve. My gut twisted. He caught me staring and quickly changed the subject. "Mom, you'll come to dinner on Sunday, right?" he said, forcing a smile. "Of course," I replied automatically, though my thoughts were still at the lake. After they left, I decided to go back. The water was calm now, deceptively innocent. I watched the surface for any sign of the suitcase. Nothing. But as the sun dipped again, something metallic glinted beneath the shallows. My heart skipped. Whatever Clara had thrown, it hadn't sunk all the way. The next morning, I brought a rake and a pair of gloves. I felt ridiculous, like an old woman chasing ghosts. But curiosity, or maybe dread, pushed me forward. After 20 minutes of waiting and prodding, I hit something solid. I pulled with all my strength until the waterlogged suitcase emerged, dripping and heavy. My hand shook as I dragged it onto the shore. It was locked, rusted, old-fashioned, the kind that looks like it's holding more than clothes. I hesitated. What if this was none of my business? What if it was something harmless? But then I remembered Clara's terrified face, the bruise on Ethan's wrist. My shaking fingers found a rock and smashed the lock. When I opened it, the smell hit me first, damp and metallic. Inside were children's clothes, tiny shoes, a stuffed rabbit, its fur matted with water, and beneath it all, a photo, Ethan and Clara, smiling, holding a baby I had never seen before. My mind spun. Ethan had never mentioned a child. There were no toys, no crib, nothing at their home that suggested a baby had ever existed. Who was this child? And why had Clara thrown away everything connected to them? That night, I couldn't face either of them. I sat by my window, clutching the damp photo, tracing the outline of the baby's face. She looked no more than a year old, bright eyes, a dimple on her left cheek. I finally called Ethan. "Son," I said softly, "there's something I need to ask you." He hesitated. "Can it wait, Mom? Clara's not feeling well." "Is everything okay?" He sighed, and his voice cracked just a little. "Yeah, just complicated." Before I could say more, he hung up. Something was terribly wrong in that house, and I was going to find out what. 2 days later, I showed up unannounced. Clara answered the door, her smile tight. "Mrs. Walters, what a surprise." "Just thought I'd bring you some soup," I said, holding the container. As she led me in, my eyes scanned the living room, immaculate, lifeless, no trace of a child. Ethan wasn't home. Clara fidgeted, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. I caught sight of a framed photo on the mantel. Ethan and Clara at their wedding, all smiles. But in one corner the frame was cracked. We sat in silence for a while before I asked, "Clara, did you and Ethan ever have children?" Her spoon froze midair. Her face went pale. "Why would you ask that?" I pretended to shrug. "I thought I saw a baby photo once." She stood abruptly. "No, you're mistaken." Her voice trembled, and in her eyes, I saw fear, not guilt. Fear. That night, I took the photo from the suitcase to a local print shop. The young man there cleaned it up digitally, enhancing the image. As the printer hummed, I noticed something I hadn't before: a hospital wristband on the baby's tiny arm. The name printed faintly, Grace Walters, my last name. I nearly dropped the photo, my granddaughter. I called Ethan again. No answer. I left message after message. When he finally called back, his voice was barely audible. "Mom, please don't ask questions about Grace. Not yet." "What happened to her, Ethan?" I whispered. "I can't. Clara wouldn't want." "Clara threw her things into the lake," I snapped before I could stop myself. There was a long silence. Then, in a broken voice, he said, "Mom, you shouldn't have seen that." The line went dead. Unable to rest, I drove to their old lake house, a place they hadn't visited since before their wedding. The key still hung from a rusty hook beneath the porch. Inside, everything was coated in dust, except for one room. A small nursery, soft yellow walls. A mobile shaped like stars still hung from the ceiling, swaying gently in the breeze. On the dresser sat a framed picture of baby Grace. She looked so alive, so real, that my chest ached. Then I noticed the baby monitor still plugged into the wall. Out of habit, I pressed the button. A faint sound crackled through. Not static, not silence. A lullaby. It was Clara's voice, soft and trembling, singing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," and beneath it, a child's faint giggle. When I confronted Ethan that evening, he looked like a ghost. His eyes were red, his shoulders slumped. "Please, Mom," he said, "let this go." I found Grace's nursery. I heard Clara singing. He buried his face in his hands. She can't accept what happened. Grace, she died 2 years ago." The room spun. "Died? But how?" "There was an accident. Clara fell asleep while Grace was in the bath. She drowned." My breath caught. "Oh, Ethan." "She blames herself," he continued, voice cracking. "She couldn't bear to see anything that reminded her of Grace. That's why she threw the suitcase. I told her it wouldn't help." Tears burned in my eyes. "And you? How have you survived this?" "I haven't," he whispered. "I just pretend to." That night, I sat by my window, watching the moonlight shimmer over the trees. I thought about Clara, her pale face, her trembling hands. I had misjudged her. She wasn't hiding a crime. She was drowning in guilt. The next morning, I went to see her. She was sitting in the garden, staring blankly at the flowers. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I didn't understand." Her eyes filled with tears. I just wanted the pain to stop. Every time I looked at those things, I saw her face. I heard her laughter. She clutched my hand. "Do you think she forgives me?" My throat tightened. "I think Grace knows how much you loved her." Clara sobbed quietly, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of peace in her expression. Sometimes forgiveness isn't asked for, it's given in silence. Weeks passed. The lake grew calm again, as if it had kept our secret. Clara began therapy. Ethan started to smile a little more, and I visited Grace's resting place every Sunday with a white rose. One afternoon, I returned to the lake to walk again. The sun danced on the water's surface. Then something caught my eye. A small stuffed rabbit washed up on the shore. The same one from the suitcase. I picked it up, still damp, but cleaner now. And I swear, I heard a child's laughter ripple through the breeze. Tears welled in my eyes as I whispered, "Thank you, Grace." Maybe forgiveness doesn't come from letting go. Maybe it comes from holding on, just enough to remember love instead of pain. 3 weeks after finding the stuffed rabbit, I woke to the sound of soft crying outside my window. At first, I thought it was a dream, the kind that lingers after grief. But when I stepped out onto the porch, I saw Clara standing barefoot in the yard, her white nightgown fluttering in the cold breeze. "She's calling me," she whispered. "Grace, she's near the lake." I wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Sweetheart, Grace is at peace." But Clara shook her head, eyes wide and distant. "No, she's waiting. She wants me to find something." Her trembling words sent chills through me. Maybe this was part of her healing, or maybe the grief was pulling her under again. Still, something in her tone, pure, unfiltered certainty, made me decide to go with her. The moon guided us as we walked toward the lake. Mist rolled across the water, making everything look ghostly. Clara stopped beneath an old willow tree that leaned over the bank. "Here," she said, "right here." I followed her gaze and noticed something I hadn't before, a small wooden cross half buried in the soil. The name Grace was carved faintly into it. Tears blurred my vision. "Ethan must have done this," I murmured. But Clara shook her head. "No, I never told him about this place." She knelt, brushing away dirt from the cross. Beneath it was a tiny silver locket, shaped like a heart. Inside was a photo of Grace and a lock of her golden hair. Clara pressed it to her lips, whispering, "I'm sorry." And for the first time, her sobs didn't sound like pain. They sounded like release. After that night, Clara began to change. She started attending grief counseling regularly. Ethan joined her. Their laughter returned in small, hesitant waves, like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. One Sunday dinner, Clara brought me a bouquet of lilies. "For you," she said shyly. "For everything you did." I smiled. All I did was worry too much. "No," she said softly. "You saw me when I was invisible." That night I realized something simple yet profound. Sometimes the only thing that saves someone is being seen. Grace would have turned 4 that week. Clara asked if we could celebrate quietly, just the 3 of us. We baked a small cake, lit a single candle, and placed the silver locket beside it. Ethan whispered a short prayer, his hand gripping Clara's tightly. As we sat in silence, a gentle breeze passed through the open window. The candle flickered but didn't go out. Clara smiled through tears. "She's here," she said. And somehow, I believed her. That night, I dreamed of a child laughing by the lake, her tiny hands reaching toward the moonlight. When I woke, my pillow was damp with tears, but my heart felt light. A few months later, a young woman came to my door holding a small envelope. "Are you Mrs. Walters?" she asked. "Yes." She smiled gently. "I'm from St. Mary's Hospital. I was the nurse on duty when Grace passed. I was cleaning old records and found something that belongs to your family." Inside the envelope was a folded drawing, a child's scribble of a sun, a lake, and 3 stick figures holding hands. At the bottom, written in a child's messy scrawl, "Mommy, Daddy, Grandma, I love you." I stared at it, unable to speak. The nurse touched my arm. Sometimes love finds a way to stay. That night, I placed Grace's drawing on the mantel beside her photo. While doing so, I noticed something tucked behind the frame, a folded piece of paper in Ethan's handwriting. It was a letter. Mom, if you're reading this, it means you found out about Grace. I didn't tell you because I wanted to protect Clara, but I realize now that hiding pain only makes it heavier. Thank you for not giving up on her or on me. You helped us remember that love doesn't die with loss. It changes shape, but it stays. Ethan. Tears spilled down my cheeks. My son, once broken, was learning to heal. A year passed. The lake no longer frightened me. I went there often to feed the ducks, sometimes joined by Clara. She'd sit on the dock, sketching. One afternoon, she showed me her latest drawing, a children's book illustration. It's called The Little Lake Star, she said. It's about a child who lives in the moonlight and helps lost hearts find their way home. Her art was full of warmth and hope. Ethan, too, had changed. He'd started volunteering at the local community center, helping parents who had lost children. Pain had shaped him, but it hadn't destroyed him. One evening, a storm rolled in. The lake raged, waves slamming against the shore. I sat by my window, praying it would pass. Then my phone rang. It was Ethan. Mom, the old willow tree fell. We're heading there to clear the debris before it floods. Be careful, I pleaded. Hours passed. The storm eased, but my worry didn't. Finally, their car pulled into the driveway. They were soaked, but safe, and laughing. Clara handed me a small piece of wood. The tree broke, but look, this part survived. Carved into it, barely legible, was the word Grace. The willow had fallen, but its name lived on. Spring arrived, and with it came renewal. Clara and Ethan decided to plant a new tree by the lake, a cherry blossom this time. They invited the community, families who had known loss, to join. As the first shovel hit the soil, Clara whispered, "This isn't to replace her. It's to remind us that love grows again." Everyone helped plant the sapling. When the wind blew, petals swirled through the air like pink snowflakes. It was as if the world was breathing again. That night, I stood by the lake alone, watching the moon reflect in the calm water. "She's home now," I whispered. A year later, on the anniversary of Grace's passing, I received a small package in the mail. No sender's name, just a tiny note that said, "Found by the lake." Inside was the stuffed rabbit, dry, clean, with a small stitched patch over its heart. Beneath it, a tag read, "Love never sinks." I pressed it to my chest and looked toward the window. Outside, cherry blossoms danced in the wind. I smiled through tears, whispering, "Thank you, Grace," because in that moment, I finally understood. Grief doesn't end. It transforms. It teaches us to see love not as something lost in the deep, but as something that keeps floating back, again and again.